Without real hard-earned competence, men are not free. They are dependent, frustrated, and ultimately disempowered. In a world where expectations of men are shifting, where traditional roles are questioned and new ones not always clearly defined, it's tempting to fall back into passivity. But here's the truth. There is no substitute for confidence, not charm, not bravado. Competence, true, grounded, tested ability is the foundation of everything else. We talk a lot these days about the challenges men are facing, falling behind in education, struggling in the labor market, becoming disengaged from civic life and from their families. But underneath those statistics lies something more fundamental: the erosion of purpose. Men need to feel needed. And that sense of being needed begins with the ability to contribute, to provide, to act effectively in the world. That starts with competence. Competence is not about being the best. It's about being capable. It's about developing mastery in something, whether it's in a skilled trade, a creative pursuit, a profession, or in relationships. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing I can handle this. That sense doesn't come overnight, and it's not bestowed. It must be earned, and in the earning, character is forged. Competence also builds independence. When you are good at something really good, you don't need to wait for someone to validate your worth. You create value, you solve problems, you carry weight. And in doing so, you gain a measure of autonomy, and that's where freedom begins. Not in self-expression or in resisting responsibility, but in the ability to take on responsibility and succeed in it. We live in a society that increasingly prioritizes credentials over capability, where image can sometimes overtake substance. But substance still matters. The man who is competent commands quiet respect. He doesn't need to shout. His results speak for him. And when things go wrong, as they inevitably do, he is the one people turn to. Not because he's flashy, but because he's reliable. There's another side to this too. Competence doesn't just empower the individual, it serves others. A competent man is an asset to his family, his community, and his nation. He's the man who shows up when others hesitate, who fixes what's broken, teaches what he knows, protects those around him. Competence enables service, and there is no deeper purpose than to serve. But to get there, we must embrace the process. That process requires effort, failure, feedback, and time. This is especially important for young men today who are often shielded from struggle or offered easier paths. We think we're being kind by lowering the bar, but we're doing harm. Growth requires resistance. Competence grows in difficulty, not ease. Think about what it means to be dangerous, not in the sense of being capable of real action, but in the sense of being capable of real action. A competent man is, in that sense, dangerous, not because he wants to dominate, but because he can step into chaos and bring order. He can stand firm when things fall apart. He's dangerous to dysfunction, to injustice, to apathy. And that's the kind of danger the world needs more of. We must recover a sense of respect for male capability, not because men are superior, far from it, but because male strength, male resilience, and male skill have unique value. And when we cultivate those traits through competence, we don't create threats, we create guardians, builders, leaders, peacemakers. The man who knows how to do something well and does it consistently becomes the backbone of his environment. Of course, competence isn't just technical, it's emotional, relational, moral. Can you listen? Can you lead with integrity? Can you admit mistakes and grow from them? These are forms of competence too. And they're no less essential than knowing how to build a house or write a program. The full measure of a man's competence includes how he treats others, how he holds himself accountable, how he shows up when no one's watching. So let's not talk about making men comfortable. Let's talk about making them capable. Let's not ask boys to suppress their energy, but to direct it toward mastery. Let's create spaces, educational, vocational, cultural, where the male drive for excellence is welcomed, not pathologized, where competition is not feared, but harnessed, where effort is expected. Because when a man is competent, he becomes free from dependence, from resentment, from the anxiety of being irrelevant. And that kind of freedom isn't loud, it's quiet, it's steady, but it's powerful. And it forms the bedrock of a life that matters, not just to the man himself, but to everyone around him. We don't need more men trying to look strong. We need more men who are strong because they've earned it. When I say men should be dangerous, I don't mean violent, I don't mean unhinged or reckless. I mean dangerous in the sense of being capable of action, of leadership, of standing firm in difficult moments. But more importantly, I mean dangerous with discipline. A man who has no power is not harmless because he is virtuous. He is harmless because he is weak. There is no virtue in that. True virtue requires the ability to act with force if needed and the wisdom to know when not to. One of the most dangerous misconceptions in our culture today is the belief that masculinity itself is the problem, that male strength, male assertiveness, male ambition are inherently suspect. And so what we've done is ask men, especially young men, to make themselves smaller, quieter, softer. In doing so, we've mistaken passivity for peace. But peace does not come from weakness. Peace comes from strength under control. A good man is not one who cannot cause harm. It is one who chooses not to. It is the choice that matters. And choice only exists when one has real capability, when a man is physically and emotionally developed, when he has the competence to make decisions, to influence others, to hold his ground. That kind of man doesn't just submit to life, he shapes it. The danger comes when men feel they have no control at all, when they are disconnected from their potential and have no map to follow. That's when frustration festers. That's when we see the darker forms of male energy. When boys grow into men without mentors, without purpose, without discipline, we see it in addiction, in apathy, in violence. This isn't because they're too dangerous. It's because they've never learned how to be dangerous well. The antidote to destructive masculinity is not the absence of masculine energy, it is its mastery. Discipline is what turns chaos into order. It's what allows strength to be put to use for something greater than the self. Whether it's physical prowess, emotional resilience, or intellectual firepower, these are tools, and tools can either build or destroy. So the question is, are we teaching our boys how to hold the tools, or are we telling them to put them down altogether? Because we live in a moment where we urgently need strong, capable men. Men who will walk into uncomfortable spaces and not shrink. Men who can defend their families and communities, not just with force, but with wisdom. Men who are competent enough to contribute meaningfully to society, but also dangerous enough that they won't be pushed around by it. That kind of presence commands respect, not through domination, but through confidence and restraint. Think about the mentors, the teachers, the fathers and coaches who shaped your own life, if you had them. Were they harmless? No. They were people who could challenge you, push you, correct you. They were firm. You knew they were capable of taking charge if things got out of hand, but they didn't use that power to intimidate. They used it to serve. That's the model. And that's the version of danger we need to reclaim. What we're really talking about here is male maturity. Because any boy can throw a punch or shout someone down, but it takes a man to master his own strength, to hold back when his emotions surge, to speak up when silence would be easier, to stand tall when others sit down. That's dangerous in the best possible way. That's what makes men trustworthy. Not harmlessness, not passivity, not compliance, but align with principle. And look, this doesn't just happen by itself. We don't grow into disciplined strength by accident. It takes deliberate effort. It takes mentorship, structure, challenge. It takes a society willing to say to its boys, you have the potential to be a force for good, but only if you learn to carry it well. We cannot keep asking young men to suppress what's natural to them. We need to help them sharpen it, refine it, so it can be used with purpose. In many ways, this is what separates a life of frustration from a life of fulfillment. Because when a man knows his own strength, when he has cultivated the skill and moral clarity to use it wisely, he walks differently. He enters relationships with more stability. He leads with more confidence. He's not afraid of his own impulses. He understands them. And because of that, he can be trusted. That's not just good for men. That's good for everyone around them. Partners, children, communities. So becoming dangerous is not about being feared. It's about being formidable in the service of others. It's about having the strength to protect, to build, to stand firm, and the judgment to know when each is needed. That is the kind of manhood worth aspiring to. That is the kind of danger the world needs more of. Strength under control is the very definition of manhood with meaning. Masculine energy is real. It's not a myth, not a social construct that can be wished away. It's active, competitive, physical, and often restless. And when it lacks direction, when it's not guided or given purpose, it doesn't disappear, it turns inward or worse, lashes out. That's not philosophy, it's observation. Boys, grow up with this drive, this need to test limits, to move, to compete, to challenge. And if we don't provide them with a clear, constructive path for all that energy, it doesn't just fade, it mutates. We see it everywhere. In the classrooms where boys are falling behind, in the streets where young men are disconnected, angry, adrift, in the rise of addiction, not just to substances, but to screens, to pornography, to virtual worlds that simulate achievement but demand nothing real. There is a vacuum of purpose. And in that vacuum, boys do not become men, they remain boys, or worse, become dangerous in all the wrong ways. It's not that there's something wrong with boys, it's that we've forgotten how to raise them. We've neglected the need to give their energy a sense of mission. Masculinity, in its healthy form, is not a problem to solve, it's a resource to cultivate. But that means stepping back and asking, what do boys need in order to channel their energy into something meaningful? The answer starts with structure and challenge. Boys need boundaries, not to cage them, but to push against. They need to know the edge so they can learn self-control, restraint, and focus. And they need goals that are demanding, real, and tied to personal growth. We often tell boys to be themselves, but we don't tell them what's worth becoming. Competence doesn't just happen, it's forged. It requires friction, pressure, sometimes failure, but it also requires someone to say, here's what's possible. Here's what it means to become a man of substance. The cultures that have understood this best have always had rites of passage, not as sentimental ceremonies, but as hard-won transitions. Something you earn, something that signals you're not a boy anymore. In modern society, we've lost that. The line between boyhood and manhood has blurred, not because we've progressed, but because we've failed to provide a map. And when there's no clear path, some will never take the journey. Masculine energy without direction is a risk, but masculine energy with direction, that's a gift. It builds, it protects, it leads, it takes initiative, it competes, yes, but with respect. It doesn't bully, it doesn't dominate, it seeks mastery, not control. It thrives in apprenticeships, in brotherhood, in mentorship, spaces where boys can learn not just how to do, but how to be. This is not about romanticizing the past. We don't need to return to rigid stereotypes or shallow heroics. We need a new masculine pie that keeps the core, the drive, the edge, the fire, but tempers it with emotional intelligence, with responsibility, with service. A man should be capable of great strength, yes, but also of great restraint. He should know when to step forward and when to listen, when to fight and when to walk away. None of this is soft. It's the hardest thing there is. It's harder than dominance. It's harder than retreat. It's walking the middle path between chaos and control, and that's where competence meets character. The mistake we've made is to think that we could neutralize masculine energy rather than guide it. But there's no neutral. It either goes somewhere productive or it leaks out sideways through violence, through withdrawal, through apathy. Boys want to matter. They want to test themselves. They want to win. That's not toxic, that's human. But if we don't help them figure out what's worth winning at, they'll settle for something smaller, something empty. Our job is not to make boys safe by taming them. Our job is to make them dangerous in the right way, dangerous to injustice, dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to despair, dangerous to anything that would diminish their potential. And that means offering them challenge, purpose, and guidance. It means helping them master themselves so they can serve something bigger than themselves. That's what it means to become a man. That's what it means to become dangerous. Too many people assume that boys will simply figure it out as they grow older, that manhood will just click into place once they hit a certain age or acquire certain responsibility. But the truth is, in today's world, the path to becoming a man is more confusing and less supported than it's ever been. Boys today are growing up in a culture that has in many ways stopped talking constructively about what it means to become a man. And yet, The need for that conversation has never been more urgent. We've removed many of the traditional markers that used to signal the transition from boyhood to manhood, whether it was leaving school for work, completing military service, or becoming a father. While some of those markers may not be appropriate or desirable for everyone today, the loss of any clear roadmap has left many young men drifting. What's taken their place? In many cases, isolation, frustration, and a deep uncertainty about their place in the world. Boys need direction, not control, not domination, but guidance, real intentional formative guidance. And that guidance has to begin early, because if we're not providing it, someone else will. And too often that someone is not a mentor, a teacher, or a parent, but an algorithm. Online culture, especially for boys who are lonely or uncertain, is full of seductive, simplistic messages about strength, status, and success. It promises clarity where the adult world seems to offer only ambiguity. It promises brotherhood where boys often feel excluded. It promises power in a world where many feel powerless. We have to step in before those messages do. Boys are actively looking for cues about who they're supposed to be. They're watching how men behave. They're listening, even when they pretend not to be. And they're searching for a standard, some structure to help them become someone worth respecting. If they don't find it in schools, in families, in their communities, they'll look elsewhere. And the risk is not just that they'll be misled, but that they'll be missed altogether. This is not an argument for returning to rigid gender roles or outdated expectations. It's not about insisting that every boy must grow into a provider, a protector, or a patriarch. It's about something deeper and more human. Boys want to become men. They want to grow into people who matter, who are strong, useful, capable, and worthy of respect. That doesn't happen by accident. It requires investment. And what's striking is that we're still not designing our institutions with this developmental need in mind. In our schools, we see a persistent gender gap in achievement. Boys are more likely to be suspended, more likely to fall behind in reading, less likely to go to college. Yet we rarely ask whether the way we teach, the environments we create, are actually serving them well. Where are the male mentors? Where are the spaces where boys are called into responsibility rather than scolded into submission? Where are the messages that say, we see you, we believe in you, and we expect something from you? We've become so wary of toxic masculinity that we've stopped talking about positive masculinity. But if we don't articulate a positive vision for what it means to grow into manhood, the vacuum will fill itself, and not always in healthy ways. Boys don't just need to be told what not to be, they need to be shown what they can become. That's why competence matters. That's why discipline matters. That's why male energy needs a target. This is why rites of passage matter, though they may look different now than in the past. It's not about staging some tribal ceremony in a forest. It's about consciously marking and mentoring that transition from boy to man. It's about helping boys take responsibility, cultivate resilience, and learn to stand in the world with integrity. It's about moving them from dependence to purpose. We have to be intentional in how we do this. That could mean structured mentorship programs, apprenticeships that teach both skill and character, or just making sure every boy has a man in his life who models maturity, not perfection, but maturity. Someone who shows that strength and kindness are not opposites. Someone who shows that being a man means stepping up, not shutting down. Without this guidance, without a clear model, too many boys are not just falling behind. They're checking out, falling into passivity, addiction, resentment. They're not being pushed to rise, they're being allowed to drift. And drift is the enemy of growth. A boy becomes a man when he's called into responsibility, into usefulness, into direction. But he has to know that such a path exists and that others are walking it with him. That is why we cannot leave the development of boys to chance. Not in this world, not now. We owe them a dangerous man in the best sense is not someone to be feared, but someone to be relied upon. He doesn't threaten the social fabric, he strengthens it. This kind of danger isn't about menace or dominance. It's about potential. It's the capacity to act decisively, to stand firm in crisis, to protect when others panic. But, and this is critical, it's also about the wisdom to know when to act and when to hold back. Competence paired with character, strength under moral authority. That's the sort of danger we need more of. There's an old idea that real men should be strong, and there's truth in that, but not just physical strength. We need emotional strength, moral strength, intellectual strength. A man who is dangerous in the right way is one who can endure discomfort for the sake of others, who can stay calm under pressure, who can lead with integrity, even when it costs him something. We've confused harmlessness with goodness. But harmlessness is not virtue, it's just the absence of power. And when men aren't encouraged to develop their strength because strength is suspect or because masculinity itself is under suspicion, we end up with passivity, resentment, or worse, explosive reactions when that energy turns inward and festers. The truth is, many young men today are unmoored. We've become so cautious about male energy that we've stopped telling boys it's okay to be strong, if that strength is guided. That it's okay to be competitive, if that competitiveness is fair and rooted in purpose. And yes, it's okay to be dangerous, if that danger is channeled toward defense, not destruction, toward protection, not predation. If a man has no edge, no courage, no capacity for confrontation, then who will he protect? What will he stand for? It's not enough to teach men not to harm. That's a low bar. We should expect more than restraint. We should expect responsibility. The most valuable kind of man in any community, in any family, is the one others can count on in times of uncertainty. When things go wrong, when things fall apart, when something must be done, he doesn't hesitate. That kind of readiness doesn't appear overnight. It's cultivated, and that cultivation takes time, mentorship, and often struggle. We're at a cultural moment where many boys are left to navigate these questions on their own. That's dangerous in a different way, because when they aren't given guidance or a positive channel for their energy, they find their own, sometimes in dark corners of the internet, in extreme ideologies, or in nihilism. They become susceptible to warped ideas of power because we fail to give them a healthy model of it. If we want men to be protectors, we have to show them what that looks like. And we have to expect it from them, not as some old-fashioned throwback, but as a modern necessity. Protection is not limited to physics. Loud safety, it's emotional presence, it's reliability. It's the kind of man who checks in on his friends, who steps up for his children, who shoulders burdens without broadcasting it. A protector listens before reacting. He gives before demanding. And crucially, he knows that real strength is often quiet. Loud men are not necessarily strong men. The most dangerous men in a room are often the calmest because they have nothing to prove. They've already proven it to themselves. But none of this happens in a vacuum. If we want to encourage this kind of dangerous manhood, we need institutions, communities, and cultures that affirm it. We need to stop sending boys contradictory messages. On the one hand, shaming them for aggression, on the other, blaming them for being disengaged. We need to recognize that male energy is a force. And like any force, it needs purpose. Purpose turns danger into duty. Without it, we risk losing a whole generation of men to either apathy or rage. So how do we give them purpose? Start with accountability, challenge them, raise the bar, don't lower it. Expect them to show up, give them responsibilities before they're fully ready, and let them grow into the role. Show them that real respect is earned through service, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in the face of it, that the world doesn't owe them significance, they must build it. Competence plus conscience. That's what makes a man truly dangerous in the best possible way. A society that distrusts its men or doubts their value will eventually suffer for it. But a society that calls its men to something higher, to be dangerous but principled, strong but humble, will reap the rewards. Because when those men stand up, others feel safer. Not because they fear what he might do, but because they trust what he won't. And that kind of man is not just dangerous, he's indispensable. The 21st century man must be strong and smart, tender and tough. He must adapt, but not surrender. That's not an easy balance to strike in a culture that often offers only two options: be the outdated patriarch or become passive and uncertain. It is a messy, but these are false choices. Masculinity is not a monolith, and it doesn't need to be torn down or romanticized. It needs to be reimagined, refined. We're living through a time when many men feel unmoored. They've heard the criticism, they've heard what not to be, but they haven't been offered enough clarity on what to be. Competence, yes. integrity, absolutely, but also strength, not just physical, though that still matters, but emotional strength, moral strength, and the courage to stand up when it's easier to sit down. Being dangerous in this context is not about being aggressive or domineering. It's about having capacity, the ability to act when it matters, to defend what is right, and to take responsibility without being asked. And here's where the challenge really lies. We expect men to adapt to a changing world, and rightly so. We've offered them very few tools or models for how to do it. We tell them to be emotionally open, but often forget to also teach them emotional discipline. We ask them to be vulnerable, but rarely pair that with expectations of resilience. We say they must step back in some areas, but fail to remind them where they are still profoundly needed. Because, make no mistake, men are needed in families, in communities, in classrooms, as mentors, fathers, sons, brothers, and friends. The issue is not whether masculinity has a place in modern society. It's whether we can reforge a version of it that is honest, earned, and equal to the moment we're in. That requires both tradition and evolution. It means preserving what's valuable, drive, protection, purpose, and discarding what has grown toxic, entitlement, domination, silence. So the new model of manhood isn't about becoming less of a man. It's about becoming more capable, more integrated, more useful. It's about building a life where competence is real and tested, and where danger, when needed, is directed by principle and not impulse. A man like that is someone others can rely on, someone others can trust, not because he says the right things, but because he does the right things, especially when it's hard. We've seen what happens when boys grow up without that model. Too many drift into aimlessness or bury themselves in distractions, digital worlds, substances, shallow validation. And it's not because they don't care, it's because they don't know what the path looks like anymore. They haven't been shown, they haven't been told that being a man still means something. And that to earn that title, they must become both competent and dangerous in the service of others. The job now is not to abandon masculinity, but to rescue it from caricature. That means being honest about the challenges men face without slipping into grievance. It means calling boys upward, not inward, toward responsibility, toward mastery, toward purpose. And it means celebrating the kind of man who is dangerous not to others, but for others, the one who can lift, build, defend, lead, the one who stays when it's easier to leave, the one who grows stronger, not by being the loudest, but by being the most dependable. We don't need men to be perfect, but we do need them to be grounded, to show up, to try. We need them to find strength in their competence and meaning in their contributions. That's how they earn respect. Not through bravado, but through value. And when a man becomes truly valuable, when he's skilled, principled, and capable of real impact, that's when he becomes, in the best sense of the word, dangerous. So yes, the world is changing, and yes, men must change with it, but that change should not be surrender. It should be growth, not erasure, but elevation.